the largest part of a neuron is. So a neuron is a specialized cell within the nervous system. So it's specialized for this specific system, and it works by transmitting information through electrical and chemical signals. And by transmitting this information, this allows the body to function within the nervous system itself. And this is an example of what a neuron would look like. So let's blow that up here. And we could see that there are different parts to the neuron cell itself, and they each have different roles that they would do. So we see the cell body, or the soma, so that's like the center here. And that's kind of like the nucleus of the cell for the neuron, and it contains the nucleus, other organelles, and it's the control center of the neuron. So it's kind of like the brain of the neuron itself. Then we have here, we see that the cyton is a choice, and the cyton is actually part of the cell body. So now, just taking a look at the cyton to start, and then we'll go through the other sections. Do we think that this section here, the cyton, looks like it would be the longest part? Because it's very localized, it's centered, it's kind of all within this circular structure. Do we see that there maybe are other structures here that are longer than it? So we have these branches here, these branches here. And yeah, it looks like this would not be considered the longest part of the neuron. So we can eliminate option A. And let's move through the other parts of the neuron. So we have the dendrites, and the dendrites, as we could see here, are these branches themselves. And the role of the dendrites is they're branch-like extensions, and they receive the signal for other neurons. So if we could kind of picture, we have this neuron here. Let's say there was another structure right there that was kind of like a duplicate of what we see there. So they would be touching each other like so. So that would be how we would transfer signals from one neuron to the next. And we see that this branch, it is longer than the centralized part with the nucleus here. We had the dendrite branches there. Now it looks like we have another one that's even longer that's listed as the axon, which is different than the dendrite, which we'll discuss next. But we can see that the axon is longer than the dendrite, and since this question is asking which is the longest part of the neuron, we know that the dendrite we could eliminate because the dendrite is shorter than the axon. And so what is the axon? This axon we could see here is this long tail structure right there. That is your axon. And what the axon does is it's a long, thin extension, and it transmits signals away from the cell body. So as we could see, we were talking about the dendrites, that if we have the dendrites touching from one neuron to the other, this is how we transmit information, but the axon is actually taking information away. So it's pushing it out because the axon is a thin extension that transmits signals away from the cell body to other neurons and muscles, unlike the dendrites that are branch-like extensions that receive signals from other neurons. So far it's looking like the axon is our longest structure compared to the other structures of the neuron, and we will likely go with axon as the choice, but let's just review option D, the nerve endings. And the nerve endings would be smaller structures that branch off here, so these tiny structures, so definitely shorter than the axon, so we can eliminate it. And what these nerve endings do is detect stimulation, and they're just the smaller projections off of these dendritic structures. So they're shorter, they're not considered the longest part of the neuron. Something else that we can review, because we were saying about how the axon sends signals away and how the dendrites have signals toward the neuron. So let's just review what some examples could be of nerve of stimulation that's coming toward versus away. So what we could discuss comes from the dendrites, so toward, versus what comes from the axon away. So a classic example could be, let's say that there is a hot stove. So let's say that this is our stove, right? And let's say that it's very hot and that a person's hand is touching. So let's say that this is the hand that's touching the stove. So now, if we're signaling to the brain that this is hot, move your hand away, hot, that would be a signal that's moving toward the body, toward the brain, to let you know that there is danger present. So we could put that next to dendrites, hot stove. And then the signal goes to your brain, but then from your brain, it goes back to your hand to tell you, move your hand away. So away would be the axon part of the neuron, and so that would be to know to move your hand. So that's just an example just to help you understand which parts work in which ways in terms of signals to the body. But for this question, the longest part of the neuron, based on the structure we see here, we know that it would be the axon.